and welcome to Power Hour. I'm your host, Veronica Dudo. Coming up later in the show, I will be sitting down with Congressman Jeff Van Drew, a Republican from New Jersey. But first, it's the week in review. The Supreme Court ended the nation's constitutional protections for abortion that had been in place for nearly a half century in its decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. The outcome is expected to lead to abortion bans in roughly half the states. The ruling came more than a month after the stunning leak of a draft opinion by Justice Samuel Alito, who at the time indicated the court was prepared to take this historic step. In the final decision issued this week, Alito wrote that Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was a 1992 decision that reaffirmed the right to abortion, was wrong and decided it must be overturned. Protests in front of the Supreme Court and other federal courthouses around the country began to swell in numbers and were expected to grow larger in coming weeks. In other news from the Supreme Court this week, the justices struck down a New York law restricting gun carrying rights. In its most important judgment on guns in over a decade, which will likely jeopardize similar regulations in states like California and New Jersey, is expected to allow more people to carry guns legally. Justice Clarence Thomas, writing on behalf of the 6 conservative judges who make up the court's majority, ruled that Americans have a right to carry commonly used firearms in public for personal defense. Ironically, the ruling came as new legislation that would tighten access to firearms passed the U.S. Senate. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell appeared on Capitol Hill this week to testify on the economy and inflation to the Senate Banking Committee. In his remarks, the chairman stressed there was certainly a possibility that the economy will fall into a recession with rising interest rates. On the financial news talk show Buy, Hold, Sell, Crosscheck Management's Todd Schoenberger said it's nearly impossible for the Fed to prevent a recession from happening, considering the FOMC announced its largest interest rate hike in 30 years. Speaking of Wall Street, bulge bracket banks are poised to return $80 billion to investors as the release of the Fed bank stress tests clears the way for unveiling of capital plans. While the big banks are expected to pass with ease, they're seeing moderating returns as they deal with inflation, policy tightening, and war. Also from Washington, the January 6 panel investigating the insurrection will pause its public hearings for the immediate future as it sorts through documentary footage and other new evidence. British documentary filmmaker Alex Holder, who has been subpoenaed regarding film he has of former President Donald Trump leading up to the assault, will be questioned behind closed doors. The hearings will now extend into July. Monkeypox testing is planned at 5 of the largest U.S. commercial labs to try and broaden monitoring beyond government facilities. Healthcare providers may tap into the service in early July. Over 140 cases have been confirmed in the United States and more than 3,300 worldwide, according to the CDC. 1 death this year has been reported to the World Health Organization as of June 17th. And finally, President Biden openly discussed his urgency for Congress to pause the gas and diesel federal tax for 3 months in an effort to provide much-needed relief to motorists being punished at the pump. As the national average price of gas hit a record $5 a gallon in June, this is expected to increase into the summer with higher demand as travel heats up. The president is hoping to enact a temporary halt to the federal tax without gutting the Highway Infrastructure Fund, which supports construction and maintenance of critical highways and public transportation. Bloomberg's oil and gas equity analyst Fernando Val appeared on this week's Buy, Hold, Sell, where he stated gas prices will reach higher highs likely in the next few weeks, and any relief will be welcome signed for motorists. And that is your week in review. Coming up after the break, New Jersey Congressman Jeff Van Drew joins me at the desk. Please stay with us to find out what he has to say about the current events impacting our country. Thanks so much for joining us. So we just found out that Roe v. Wade was struck down by the Supreme Court. It is a ruling that we've been waiting to hear for several weeks now. What is your reaction?
Well, my reaction is not total surprise. For years now, there's been a concern that there's nothing embedded in the Constitution that says that people have a right to an abortion. It's a states' rights issue. And that's where I think it's going to come back to. That's where it was. I think states are individually going to determine what they're going to do. I think people should stay calm. They should stay peaceful. They should respect the court. You can't just respect the court when it issues an opinion that you like, but say that it should be destroyed or packed when it issues a decision you don't like. It is our Supreme Court of the United States of America, and we should all respect the decisions it makes and respect each other. People are calling for violence or calling for, all types of disobedience. I don't think that's the answer. I think we try to work this out using our brains and not our muscles.
So the leak occurred. A lot of people wanted to get to the bottom of that. Do you think that will continue on, or now that we have the decision, that will sort of fall to the wayside?
It would be horrible if it continued on. It's horrible if we talk about packing the Supreme Court. We've all known in the past on either side of the aisle that packing the court is a bad thing. Leaking the information out of the court is a terrible thing, and whoever did that should be caught and literally should be punished for it. The Supreme Court of the United States is a sacrosanct, very special thing. It's not a political organization. It doesn't have a political arm. It's about interpreting what is constitutional and what is not.
Now, also gun safety legislation, finally a historic moment that it did have bipartisan support both in the Senate and the House. What was your vote and why?
I didn't vote for it, and I'll tell you why, because the bill's not really going to do anything, number one. Number two, it gives red flag rights. It gives money for red flag laws in all the states. Some states may deal with it appropriately. Other states may deal with it terribly. God knows what they would do in New Jersey. So I don't think that you should be voting for something and you don't know the repercussion of it at all, because these weren't defined. That alone is one of the biggest reasons. Secondly, I have legislation that would really make sure that schools were safer and that you would always have somebody, not a scary person, but somebody almost like a community officer, and not every school does, who's going to be in the front, that all the positions around the school, the doors, windows, etc., would be absolutely safe and wouldn't be allowing any access to occur. I also think that you should have, a buzzer system where you have to be checked twice, bulletproof glass when you go in to make it safer so nobody can even shoot their way in. So we can make our schools safer. We can also help people because there's a huge amount of mental health issues out there right now. People are not happy in America right now. That's a very, very sad thing. We need to get more help, more support, and more money for mental health issues. That's a really big deal. Lastly, we really need to make sure to restore the rule of law. What's happening in our major cities, the crime that's occurring, record amounts of crime. People are out on 20 and 30 priors. They do something, I'm talking violent crime. They commit a violent crime. They're let right out again sometimes before the ink even dries on their paperwork. That's wrong. I do believe in 3 strikes and you're out. You do 3 bad, violent things, you don't belong out on the street. We have all kinds of terrible people being put back out on the street. We're opening up the prisons, and literally our court system is like a turnstile. That has to change. It's wrong, and it's hurting our good American people.
So inflation is at a 40-year high. Of course, a lot of Americans are paying more at the pump. The pain is real for them. And then we found out that President Biden wants to have a gas tax holiday. Of course, previous President Obama called it a gimmick. We also heard House Speaker Nancy Pelosi kind of say that it's a showbiz idea. Is this the best that the Biden administration could come up with?
Well, it isn't the best, but it's what they did come up with. They ought to coordinate a little more on that side about making sure they're all saying the same thing. Most of the people around him, even on his side of the aisle, say it's a really stupid idea. A, you're literally not going to be able to have the money to fix the roads and streets and bridges. And B, it's not going to make that much difference. You're talking 18 cents or less if you do it, and it would vary from state to state and how it was really handled. And we created this problem ourselves. He created the problem. When the first day that he was there, he closed down the Keystone Pipeline. As soon as he got into office, he said, we are not going to produce any serious amounts now of fossil fuels. You can't do it that quick. It's not a switch you turn on and off. And even if you want to go to different kinds of energy, understandably, if it's not going to cost us a fortune more, we have to make sure we're not going to depend on China more, because the kind of energy that he wants to make us totally reliant on would make us totally reliant on China because of the rare elements that they have 90% of and nobody else has. So everything he did from day one was wrong with energy, and it literally caused harm. We go from being number one in energy to now floundering around on our knees, going to OPEC, going to Venezuela, going to real bad folks and begging them for help. That's wrong. That's not the America I know. That's not the America of strength. And we've got to get back to doing better things. That's the answer. Open these permits, allow these permits to go forward, sit down with the oil companies, see how we can produce more energy as quickly as possible. That'll get those prices down.
So immigration is obviously a hot topic, and we are seeing almost 1.5 million illegal immigrants coming in so far in the past several months, and a lot of Border Patrol have put on record that they're seeing it from people coming in from over 100 countries. What is your reaction to the Biden administration allowing this illegal activity?
It's bizarre. I can't imagine. There's no country. Mexico wouldn't do this. Mexico has borders that are intact. We should have continued finishing building the wall. We should make sure that we have enough Border Patrol. We don't, and back up for them. We should make sure that our borders are safe and intact. I believe in legal, good immigration, and legal immigrants don't like what's going on right now. It's terrible. And I'm sure you do know, dozens upon dozens of individuals have been caught, educated people sneaking in, that are on the terrorist watch list. That's scary, because remember, we only caught some of them. We don't have enough Border Patrol to catch all of them. And then this president and this majority is scattering them all over the country at a lot of times when we don't know. We're paying legal fees for them. We are paying transportation fees for them. We are paying for their housing. Why? Why are we doing this? We've got to take care of America and our Americans. There's lots of people that are really scraping by right now. The cost of everything's gone up. People say, well, salaries have gone up. That Biden likes to say salaries have gone up. Yeah, they've gone up nowhere near to cover the cost of Joe Biden's and this majority's inflation ever. So we have to take care of America. America number one, America strong, and America going into the future.
Now, you have said that you don't agree with Biden's plan to reduce tariffs on China. You said, in fact, they should be putting more in place. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I can explain it because, it might seem to some, well, this is just a business move, but it's not. The stronger we make China, who is getting progressively stronger all the time and not dealing with us in a fair way. So, yeah, we're taking in their goods. We're importing their stuff. They don't want our stuff. And we've got to get to a more equal level where we're working together if we're going to have that relationship and not just be there, again, begging China for everything and giving them everything. Iran is doing really bad things, and yet what do? We give them money. The World Health Organization lies to us. Literally, they were caught, lied to us about COVID, and we're in cahoots, to use an old-fashioned term, with China, doing this together with China. And we subsidize the World Health Organization more than anybody else. And even when we look at things like Ukraine, I really feel badly for the Ukrainian people and what they're going through. I also feel badly for what the American people are going through. We sent $40 billion over there recently. I didn't vote for it because I know we need help here. $40 billion. We don't know where all the money is going. We don't know what all the money is going for. And we don't even know all the countries that are going to get it, because it's not only going to be Ukraine. And the subsidies to Ukraine from other countries are really subsidized by us. So we're paying for us and we're paying for them.
So it's come to light a lot of information about Hunter Biden and his alleged business partnerships with a lot of our adversaries, specifically in China. Do you think that President Joe Biden is compromised?
He is, and I'm sad to say that, and that's beyond politics. I don't want to see any president be compromised, but he is, and I think you'll see in the future. I think that my party is going to take over the majority in these midterm elections, and I think there are going to be investigations into this. He was there. We know. Remember when they said there was no laptop? They lied. There was a laptop.
It was Russian disinformation.
And not only was there a laptop, but it was stupidly left at a repair store. I mean, the whole story is so bizarre, it's hard to believe. There's no question that Hunter Biden's been heavily involved with the Chinese. There's no question that Joe Biden, nothing to do with his presidency, especially when he was vice president, was really involved, may be now. And we can't have that. We have to have objective, strong leaders who are fighting for America and Americans. This is not a national, global economy. This is America, and we have to stand up for it.
And can you talk a little bit about your pushback with what President Biden wants to do with the World Health Organization and kind of give them more of a foothold here in the U.S.?
Yeah, last thing in the world you want to do. I mean, let's be really honest. Many countries in the world are a little bit jealous of the United States. Many countries in the world don't appreciate us all the time, and that's fine. That's kind of human nature almost. But when you give other entities, other countries, other organizations like the World Health Organization, who's wrong half the time, and you give them power over the health decisions that are going to be made in America when dealing with pandemics or whatever else. That's absolutely wrong. We are not a global economy. We're a global economy in that we trade and do things like that, but we're not controlled by other countries in the world. Again, we're the United States of America, the most powerful nation, I hope, will continue on the face of the earth, the most wonderful nation on the face of the earth that really does want to help others and do good things. But we're not going to have, I don't want to have the World Health Organization come in and tell me what's going to happen to my children and grandchildren and families as far as their health care. That's wrong.
So a lot of Americans are dealing with so much. As we talked about earlier, a 40-year high for inflation. You're seeing interest rates going up. Right now, the labor market seems tight, but we could start to see, some unemployment tick up. And then on top of this, we're talking about potential food shortages. We already know we had the baby formula shortage. A lot of Americans are looking at this and they wanted to come out of COVID and just go back to normal and live their lives. And now there's just so many problems. I mean, what is your message to your constituents, to voters about what you're trying to do in D.C.?
Well, what I'm trying to do in D.C. is move away from the focus that, again, Joe Biden and his folks have had because it's been wrong. The way we closed down everything. We had to be careful. I didn't mean that everybody should just run around and shouldn't care, but just closing down businesses. New Jersey, let's take the state of New Jersey where I'm from. 1/3 of the small businesses in South Jersey closed because of the way they did it. We could have worked with those. They begged. These business people begged for help to work with them. Not just money. It wasn't even money. It was like, how can we figure out to keep people safe, yet at the same time still be open? There were a lot of arbitrary decisions that really hurt us. Then we spent trillions, not billions, trillions of dollars, and we gave people tons of money to stay home when a lot of folks really didn't have to stay home. And the reason it seems like our employment is good is because there are just less people working in total. Everybody will tell you they're dying for help. People need people to work. But now people have learned how to use the system and not work. They got the COVID money, they're getting unemployment, they get other money, and hey, why should you work when you can do this? We should work because we're Americans, and that's what Americans do. They work, they build, they make things better. We didn't have that focus at all. They spent way too much money too quick. A lot of states are just sitting on this COVID money, billions of dollars, even in New Jersey, doing nothing with it. That money should be sent back. We have to get our economy under control. That's the reason we have so many of the problems that we do right now.
Now, the all-important midterm elections are coming up. You offer an interesting perspective on this because you were a Democrat, and of course that famous Oval Office meeting with then President Donald Trump, you talked a little bit as to why that you felt that your thoughts were in better alignment with the Republicans. Do you see a red wave this November?
I do.
And talk a little bit as to what you think the Democratic Party is now.
So there was even a red wave last year in the last election, and I think there's going to be an even stronger one this year. I think people just don't want to keep doing this. And I meet people all the time. You'll be at a restaurant or getting your car washed or whatever, just the average day folks and the average day things that we do. And people come up to me and say, please tell us there's hope. We're really scared. This is the greatest challenge America has ever seen in its history since the Civil War. We're close to losing our America. This is no joke in so many different ways. The way we educate our kids. What are we teaching our kids about in second and third grade in some of these school systems? Why would that be put in texts? That's got nothing to do with what they need to learn. Then you're learning your ABCs and to add and subtract and math and computers and science and everything is going in the wrong direction. People are willing to tolerate if one thing goes the wrong way or two things. It's everything. It's the open borders. It's the supply chain. It's the crime that's going on. It's just every single thing that we see in our country. The exit from Afghanistan. How could we do that? How could we be that stupid? Anybody a military cadet, a kid, would know that's not the way that you exit from a country like that. I mean, this country, my goal for this country is for it to be number one again, and I'm proud of that. And somebody says that isn't good, and I've had people say, well, that's wrong, we're the same as everybody else. No, we're not, we're better. I mean, America should be number one, and it can help other countries, but we have to help our people first, and we have to be strong. I believe in a strong America. That's kind of our motto on my signs and everything I put out, a strong America. Ronald Reagan said one time, and it's so true, he said a lot of things that were true, no country is ever attacked because it's too strong, yet we're weakening our military. We're giving in. And if we're not careful, we're going to lose this America that we know and love. I don't want to see that happen. And the reason I became a Republican is because there are many more like-minded people like me in the party who believe that as well. And the Democratic Party of today, as Ronald Reagan said, again, I have to quote him on it because it was perfect. The party, I didn't leave it. I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. It's not the Democratic Party we know, all this stuff that we're doing. The Democratic Party used to care about working people and about a strong America. It now just cares about literally changing the social fabric and the culture of America to a socialist, progressive fabric that we've never seen in our history in our America. And I don't want that.
All right. Thanks so much for taking the time to speak with
Thank
us.
you.
All right.
My pleasure.
Thank you. So much is happening with the economy these days, and to break it all down is CrossCheck Management's Todd Schoenberger. Welcome so much.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk first. The president is proposing the gas tax holiday. What are your thoughts?
It's awful, and I'll tell you why. Because the whole purpose of when you're trying to bring numbers down as far as these inflation numbers that we keep hearing about, you want what we call on Wall Street demand destruction. And what that means is you want people to simply curb their spending habits. You don't want them to drive as much. Therefore, if there's less demand, that will bring oil down. Now, right now, we do have a supply-demand imbalance, but at the end of the day, simple economics 101 will tell you, without demand being there, prices will eventually come down. With Biden, what he's trying to say is, look, let's erase 19 cents a gallon off of a gallon of gas. It's not going to move the needle at all, but it's symbolic. It looks good. It's a midterm election year. I get it. I understand what he's trying to do. But when you do that, you're actually going to cause people to say, oh, wow, okay, gas is cheaper now. Let's fill up the tank and let's go for a little roadshow party somewhere. And when they do that, that's going to increase demand. They actually tried doing this in the state of Maryland, but they had a surplus and with their budget. So therefore, they figured, let's get rid of the state tax. That did bring prices down a little bit. But at the end of the day, the long-term view was that prices actually went higher than where they were when they started. I would expect we would see the same thing, and I think that's why Congress is probably given the Heisman on this intent of what the White House really wants.
So the demand will continue and possibly even actually increase. So do you think he's doing it just to buy votes?
Yeah, of course he is. Look, it's an election year. You have this thing called the misery index that you haven't heard very much about lately. I'm not sure why. But the misery index is when you take inflation and then add in the unemployment rate. And right now we're at double digits on the misery index. We haven't seen that since the Obama days. So you have so many voters that are out there that are very unhappy with the current administration. They feel that they're not getting their voices heard. They're screaming and yelling about higher food costs, higher prices at the pump. I mean, right now, the biggest metric that we've seen on Wall Street, in Wall Street circles, is these payday loans. We have a record number of payday loans. And what that is for the viewer to understand is that's somebody that actually is saying, look, I get paid on Friday, but I need money maybe on Monday, a few days earlier. They take a payday loan. They're given time to pay it off, but the interest rates on these things are like 30, 40%. They're crazy. Wow. So now people are actually they're trying to take money sooner because they have all of these overhead expenses just to live. And as a result of that, now you have your people are taking on more debt. They don't have any cash, they don't have any more credit. So what are they going to do? This is what they're resort to doing. And Americans are unhappy. And I think, you're going to see a colossal change when it comes to the midterm elections.
So speaking on the issue of inflation, we've reached a 40-year high. We also saw this week Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell, he testified on the Hill.
Yep.
And, he really talked about the tools that are in the Fed's toolbox. Do you feel like they're late in being aggressive with these interest rate hikes?
Absolutely. Look, this is why we saw a 75 basis point, 0.75% rate hike, even though in the 10 days prior to that, everybody on Wall Street was expecting a 0.5% increase. Now, the average person might say, that doesn't really mean a lot. Well, it actually does, because it sets the precedent of what future interest rate hikes might look like. And here we have another meeting that's coming up. You can only assume that when you start seeing future Federal Reserve meetings in the next coming months, you're going to see additional rate hikes. And we're not feeling it just yet, but you will start feeling it. And that's called the demand destruction. When you have higher interest rates, people aren't going to go out and buy homes, they're not going to buy cars, boats, etc. And they will curb their spending habits. The question, though, is how high do they need to go? On Wall Street, we actually figured in September that was going to be the last meeting that we would see a rate hike. Well, guess what? Now the talk is about December. And December we'll see it. That means we're going to have Fed rate hikes for every meeting that's going on for the rest of the year. And there's 4 more meetings that are taking place. So now you have to start assuming that, we go into 2023. If inflation is not down at the number that the Fed really wants, and I think Americans really want, you're going to see additional rate hikes in 2023. And it's going to get ugly. It's going to get really ugly. So, I would hope that we start seeing a curb from American spending, but it might be too late.
There's a lot of talk about a recession. Do you think we're in one? Do you think one is coming up? Do you think we'll see it next year? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a fascinating subject because here you have the July 4th holiday coming up. AAA came out and said we're going to see a record number of travelers. So people are still willing to go out. They're willing to travel. They want to spend money. And you would think with a looming recession, which also means higher unemployment, less jobs that would be available. If that's the case, why would people just start spending discretionary income? I'm really concerned about the fact that if we are in a recession, I haven't seen a big change. The only change that you see and the only metric were those payday loans I mentioned. So you don't have a lot of people that are out there really curbing their spending. I mean, with the big box retailers, we saw it with Target and Walmart with their forecasts, with their warnings. And the Kohl's was the same way. We heard a lot of warnings from them. But realistically, here we are in Washington, D.C. If you take a walk down the street, you're not getting the feeling there's a recession. People are out and about. They're having a good time. They're eating at restaurants. They're having cocktails. You would not think that yes, we are in an economic doom and gloom environment. But that's the problem, because here we might not have it today, but things are moving so quickly with this economy that realistically, when we go into that third quarter, which starts next week, you really might end up seeing that slowdown, that it's going to have that ripple effect across not just the United States economy, but worldwide.
Now, the Biden administration has tried to lay the blame on Russia's invasion of Ukraine regarding the high prices at the pump.
Yeah.
And we're hearing Putin's, pump hike. And so we also heard from Chairman Powell this week that inflation was on the rise long before that.
Oh, yeah.
What should Americans make of this mixed messaging from the same administration?
Well, you should probably believe the guy that from the Fed. I mean, because he's a subject matter expert when it comes to this. And not to discredit the President of the United States and the White House when they do say and make these claims that, yeah, because of Putin. But that's a headline story. So remember, the politicians are going to do what they can to win votes. The job of Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell is to make sure that when we're setting monetary policy, that the economy, they're doing it in a manner that is not going to send this country into a recession or a deep recession that could have catastrophic consequences. So when you look at what one person is saying compared to the other, what is their objective out there? It's very easy to blame Putin. He's the villain in the story for obvious reasons. But when you start thinking, who do you blame for higher gas prices? And when you're paying $80 just to fill up a 15-gallon tank, and you start thinking about higher food costs just to put food on your family's table. And yeah, it's very easy to blame the guy that is the one who is sending missiles into Ukraine. And here you have Zelensky, who's really coming across as a folk hero, actually, to so many around the world. So when you see that and you start thinking about what Putin's doing, very easy to point the finger to him. But Biden needs to point the finger at somebody. I mean, he can't do it with Republicans. Republicans are kind of just sitting back. They're in the minority right now on the Hill, and that is a huge advantage for the GOP going into November.
Now, a few weeks back, Fed Chair Powell said that we can have a soft-ish landing, and then this week on Capitol Hill, when he testified, he did admit a softest landing would be challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, what does Wall Street make of this?
Well, he wants a soft landing because what he's trying to say is, look, we will, as long as we don't go into a recession. And a recession, for the viewers out there to understand, is that's 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. So realistically, if you want a real number of what GDP needs to do, we need to grow 2 to 2.5% per year in this country. And the reason for that is that it maintains enough job creation for population growth. When you're negative 2 quarters in a row, that's bad. A soft landing on what Jerome Powell is saying is, look, we're going to have a slowdown in GDP. We're going to be below the 2 to 2.5% line, but maybe a soft landing would be maybe 0.5% to 1%. Are we there? Like I said, I don't know if we can hit that soft landing. Remember, this was the largest interest rate increase in 30 years.
But this week he said even that will be challenging.
Right.
Does that make you a little more nervous?
Makes me very nervous, because here the Federal Reserve Chairman is trying to set expectations, and he's trying to say, look, we're trying our best to do this, but there's so many uncertainties. The best thing that's taken place is that this is living history. I mean, and it's going to be painful, but the fact that what we're going through now is going to impact centuries of Americans, because we're going to look back at this time, the time of free money, the time of, we talk about this on Buy, Hold, Sell, the 12 years of printing money, quantitative easing, where you had so much money that was being processed, that was actually out there to help stabilize an economy that was coming off of the Great Recession starting in 2008 with the housing bubble. Now, we already went through that, and here we are. We're still living in that Great Recession. We're still coming out of that now, and this is what's happening. So to go through this process, you're going to have economists centuries from now, literally. I know it sounds crazy, but they'll look back at this time and they'll say, my goodness, here, look what the United States did during that time, and how did we recover, and what are the mistakes that are being made? That's the scary part. We are making mistakes. We just don't know what they are yet, and we probably won't find out until, obviously, it's too late.
What do you think think Wall Street makes when you see someone like an economist of the caliber for Larry Summers? He, of course, was under the Clinton administration, Obama administration, and he has his predictions. And then you hear President Joe Biden when he's asked about whether a recession is inevitable, and he comes back with his mocking way. Do you think he doesn't get it? I mean, people in Main Street, people on Wall Street, what's the reaction?
Yeah, I think the reaction is purely negative, because what it's saying is that the president of the United States is disconnected from Main Street. It's one thing, I look back at when Obama was president and he talked about the fat cats of Wall Street. And, that was a time when I was working at the exchange, and we had traders that would have to moonlight. There was a bar up the street, up on Wall Street and Broadway, called Suspenders. It was this basement bar. It was always filled with traders that were moonlighting at night because they weren't making enough money, and these were the so-called fat cats. It's the optics. Politics is about optics. So when you have the President of the United States as saying something, he's being, he's being standoffish. Yeah, the average American, the guy drinking a can of beer and drinking a truck in Midwest America, is looking at that saying, this guy doesn't get me, and I'm going to vote for somebody that gets me. And that's a big problem. So I would suspect that, Larry Summers is like that. I respect Larry, and he's just a brilliant economist. But his stance, he does incorporate politics way too much, especially from the left. And when you start throwing things out there saying, oh, we're not in a recession and things are going to be just fine, and there's no inevitability that we're going to fall negative GDP and et cetera, et cetera. When you hear that, it's very difficult for somebody in middle America or anywhere actually a part of America, coast to coast, that's struggling right now, that can actually understand that. Because they're thinking, these guys don't understand me in Washington. I'm going to vote for change. And we heard a lot about that in the Obama years, about voting for change. Yeah, I think that's what the GOP is saying. Look, you want change? This is what's going to happen. And you're going to have this just seismic shift over on Capitol Hill, where you're going to have the red states really take over in the House and the Senate. And I think it's going to be awful for the Democrats. Unless there is some monster change that you're going to see over the next few months, it's going to be hard to believe that the Democrats can survive a lot of these races.
And speaking of optics, we saw a recent meeting where the president did not meet with executives from the oil and gas companies. Instead, in the afternoon, he met with CEOs from the wind and power sector, right? So if you're on Wall Street, what are your thoughts moving forward in terms of putting together a portfolio? I mean, where are you going to invest?
Well, the late great T. Boone Pickens used to laugh at the whole idea of wind energy. I mean, he was a big oil guy, but we've been hearing about these alternative fuels for so long, and that's one thing. And I believe you mentioned this before, was that how the Biden administration is very green, does look for renewables, and that's kind of the mantra of the Democratic Party. We heard about this years ago with ethanol, how ethanol was going to save the world and save the planet. And I've always been of the belief that until I see an ethanol pump on Pennsylvania Avenue, it's never going to be a real deal. It's always in the Midwest. But that's a whole other topic. I do think, and it's typical of the Democrats, find the villain in the room. What do you do now? You have higher gas prices, and it's punishing Americans at the pump. So what do? You blame the big oil companies, and let's start talking about that windfall profits tax. And then you start hearing about, how much money the oil companies made. The single largest shareholder of ExxonMobil stock is the school teachers union in this country. So you start penalizing with these windfall profits taxes against a company like ExxonMobil, you're actually punishing that teacher, the elementary school teacher who's driving a Toyota Corolla in middle America. It's not a good deal. So you have to rethink the process. And the problem is that you don't have a lot of Republicans out there that are going to say this, but quite frankly, they don't need to, since they're going to win anyway in November. But you really need the president to really start embracing big oil companies. I mean, if anything, the big oil companies will invest more money into research and development. And when they do that, they're going to look for renewable energy. They're the leaders. They're the frontline leaders in that industry. If they're looking for a way to make an alternative, find that new product, let them do that. But you have to release regulations. You have to let them be who they are. And like I said, they have a fiduciary responsibility to those shareholders like the teachers union, but realistically going forward, you got to be able to embrace those companies. And I know that the thing is that it's against his base. The base wants the wind and the renewables and all that stuff, but it's just not realistic, and it costs way too much damn money in this country to start investing and start looking at those renewables.
All right, well, we'll certainly be watching. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Veronica.